Welcome to the 13th episode of the Perfectly Imperfect Spiritual Podcast. My today's guest, Lauren Joy Rose, is a fellow member of Kyle Gray's Angel team. She is a soul contract practitioner and educator who passionately shares her love for the Soul Contract Numerology System on her podcast, Let's Talk Vibes. I'm all about learning new spiritual modalities that support us on our self-discovery and evolution journey, and I thought it would be lovely to have Lauren on the podcast. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Marta. I'm so excited to be here. Yes, I love the soul contract system. It's something that I don't think many people know about. So I'm so excited to have the opportunity to share about it with your listeners. And it's honestly so kind of funny the way that we met. Like you said, we're both part of the Angel team. And when you're on that team in this Facebook group, they have like an advertising Wednesdays. And it happened that our podcast went out on a Wednesday. And I happened to not be able to sleep really that well that night. And we had it published for like 12:01 a.m. my time. I'm on the West Coast of the United States. So here I was awake and I was like, well, I might as well take this link that's now live because it's like 12:10 a.m. my time. And I happened to open up Facebook because I was going to make a post about it. And then I saw the advertising post where it's like, you can advertise your thing. And so I was like, oh, well, let me just put it there. Let me share. And then you saw it and you reached out. And so here we are.
Yes, that's so exciting because as so many people that you've probably spoken with, I've heard about soul contracts, but not about the soul contract system. So I'm wondering whether you would be able to talk a little bit. I know like you have the whole podcast that focuses on the system, but could you briefly introduce our viewers and listeners to the system?
Absolutely. So it's interesting. This system, it was first channeled in by a man named Frank Alper in the 1980s, and he was channeling the soul of Moses. So actually, the original name for this system was the spiritual numerology of Moses. And I went on to study with a man, Nicholas David Nahn, who wrote the book Your Soul Contract Decoded. That's how I found him, because I found the book. And he studied with Frank in the 90s. And he was the one who changed the name to the soul contract system because he felt like it was getting confused with traditional numerology, which actually has the name of Pythagorean numerology. And so for people who are familiar with their life path number, right, their expression number, there is soul urge number, there are the different numbers there. Numerology is not as well known as, say, astrology, right? If you know astrology, you may be familiar with the idea that there are different branches, or not even the idea. You're familiar with that. You understand there's more Western astrology, there's Vedic astrology coming from India. Well, with numerology, it's not as well known. So people just think that this is all that there is. But if you really think about numerology, right, the study of numbers, or as I like to say, the spiritual, esoteric study of numbers, the energetic study of numbers, that's really a field of study. And there's more than one system under that branch. It just so happens that the only system that's really well known uses numerology as though it's the only one. So it's really easy to see where that motivation came from for him to change the name of the system. But now soul contracts are also a concept that's really well known. And I feel like it also gets a little bit confused. So I'm like, he changed the name for less confusion. And I think it just round up in another place that can still be confusing. So the way that I will put it these days is that I really, rather than talking about the contracts you make between a certain soul, between souls, because we talk about soul contracts in that respect. Now I call those soul agreements in order to have a little less confusion when I'm speaking, because I talk about soul contracts all the time, meaning the chart from the soul contract numerology system, right? So when I say, oh, your soul contract, I mean your birth chart in the same way that you might refer to your natal chart in astrology. So that's a little bit of what I do to kind of change different language. So when it comes to the life path number version of numerology, I will call it traditional or Pythagorean numerology. I'll say the Soul Contract System, or
Mm-hmm.
right, the Soul Contract Numerology System, to make it a little bit clear. And then I'll say soul agreements, because that's just what happens when you start to pioneer something, but then something new comes onto the scene. It's like, okay, well, how can you distinguish? Because not everybody's familiar with everything. So that's a little bit about how I talk about these systems. But what is the system, right? Because this is just to say this is how it's
Mm-hmm.
different from the other things that you know. But what is the Soul Contract Numerology System? What was the system that was channeled in? Well, similar to astrology, or similar even to traditional numerology, we take information from the time that you were born. But unlike those other systems, your date of birth is not what's important. I don't even need to know your date of birth to look up your chart. All I
Mm-hmm.
need to know is your name,
Mm-hmm.
because what this system looks at is the frequency of sound. Sound is creative. So the sound, the frequency of our names helps to create our life and our life circumstances. So what I do is I take your name from your birth certificate, the name given to you at birth, and then I create the chart. And through looking at the chart, I'll be able to see what was your soul's intentions in terms of lessons that your soul wanted to learn,
Mm-hmm.
the talents and the abilities that it came in with, to use as tools and skills to help navigate the challenges that you would face while trying to learn lessons, and the goals that your soul has intended to learn. And there's also an overarching life goal or life purpose that we call the soul destiny. So that's what I can see in your chart, and it's so amazingly accurate. It continues even to blow me away by how blown away people are by
Mm-hmm.
how accurate and how much they resonate with their charts.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for explaining a little bit. And what I love about you uh, talking about that system is that it can help people to navigate through various challenges. It can empower them to concentrate on their strengths. So it's not another modality for people to use as an excuse. This is why my life looks like that, and I'm not going to do anything with that. Whereas from what I have heard in your podcast as well, you empower your clients as well to be able to work with those charts.
Yeah. Yeah. What I really think is so important, or the power of it, is that just like with astrology, right? If you have, a really kind of ethical astrologer, they're not going to look at at your chart and tell you who you are. They're going to look at your chart and tell you who you have the potential to be. So in that same vein, your chart, your soul contract, is also showing potential, because, one part of it is that two souls, for example, you and I, we actually, because I've taken a look at your
Mm-hmm.
chart right now, um we have some of the same numbers. Some of them we have in different positions, but we actually have one number in the same position as well.
Mm-hmm.
So even though we have the same number in the same place, we could have chosen that for different reasons. Our souls are on their own unique journey, and that even though we maybe have sort of the same general tools, we could be utilizing them in completely different ways, right? So it's always a potential. It's always going to be different for everyone in terms of how that's going to manifest exactly in their life. But what I think is so powerful, especially when it comes to the talents, and especially for myself, I'm 31 years old. A lot of my friends, especially when I started doing my readings, it's like we're in our mid 20s. So that's a very different place to be in life compared to, other practitioners I would, be in training with. They're maybe in their 50s or 60s. They've lived a lot more life than myself and my friends. And so I think really recognizing that potential can be so empowering, because sometimes you don't see, if it doesn't exist already, you're not seeing that in yourself. So for me to be able to see the potential in your chart and be able to say, hey, have you tapped into this yet? Is there any part of you that secretly imagines that for
Mm-hmm.
yourself, or but you just couldn't even let yourself want it per se because it wasn't here yet? I'm here to tell you that potential is there.
Mm-hmm.
And also I'm here to tell you that when times are hard, know that that potential is there and consciously tap into it. I kind of think that knowing that potential is almost like that first step of the manifestation, because really what is manifestation, right? I think sometimes manifestation is just giving your thoughts, seeing it for yourself. And so for me to be able to see this in you helps you see it in yourself, helps you to manifest it into real life, into your life.
Mm-hmm. And what I love that you also agree, because I've heard it in one of your episodes, is that you also agree that our future is not set in stone. And I'm a big believer of that, because when I read people and they come for me and they want to hear about their present life, about their future, I always tell them that I'm reading, well, what I'm telling them, it's based on the energy that I'm reading right now, but they
Yeah.
have free will. They're on one path, but there might be another path that's going to appear in their life, so they can actually choose differently. So I really am a big believer of that. And I also believe no matter what path we are going to choose, there will be always life lessons for us to learn.
100%. So do you read tarot as well as the angel cards?
Well,
Angel
I
cards?
am mainly a psychic medium, so
Okay.
I just connect directly with spirits.
Yeah.
Uh, I have now started using cards. This is interesting. When I first started, Spirit didn't want me to use any cards because then, well, they really needed me and wanted me to develop trust that I'm actually
Yes.
channeling messages from the spirit realm. So it's only recently, maybe the last 2 years or so, that Spirit wanted me to join Kyle Gray's angel team, start
Yeah.
studying cards. And now I started using cards. I'm not that drawn into using tarot. Sometimes I do it. Uh,
Yeah.
but whenever I use those cards, I still don't go during the readings to the booklet and the description.
Yeah.
I just rely on the messages that I receive from the spirit realm. So this is like something that adds on, something that can enrich readings.
Yes. So for me, when I had my spiritual awakening, my first modalities were tarot and astrology that I
Mhm.
got interested in. And so I really say that for so many of these modalities, they are languages to put, energy into human language, right? So that's sometimes the way that I see them. It's just a language. And for tarot, for example, when I talk about and think about the fact that, yeah, I don't believe the future is written in stone, that is always, if I ever have the Wheel of Fortune come up in a reading, that was an association I made really early on. So it's always a reminder of that. And especially if I'm doing a spread and that card falls in the position that within the spread is meant to be about the future, it's
Mhm.
even more, we're not, it's not written in stone. And you can also think about, it can also mean about cycles are breaking and all of that. It can mean kind of what the card can mean, but it also is a reminder, no matter where it is in the spread, hey, remember the future is not written in stone. Um, and that card will always just kind of come to mind when that conversation comes up. It's like, yep, not written in stone.
Mhm.
Can change it.
Perfect. So important. Could you also mention a little bit, because I find it fascinating. I know souls are very clear and intentional about their names.
Yeah.
And I listened to that podcast, and each of us, like, we have stories of actually our children choosing their names. And I'm a big believer because this is what happened in my
Yes.
case as well. So if you can talk a little bit about
Sure.
that as
Yeah.
well.
So that's kind of one of the principles that would be behind the system, right? So, of course, you can believe anything that you want, but the system does kind of have, the principle that, well, we do reincarnate, our souls are on a lesson, are on a journey of learning lessons,
Mhm.
and that it does kind of believe almost in the sense, of that like pre-planning stage of life. And that part of what you're then going to choose is that you're going to choose your name, and you choosing your name, choosing your family. And through those, you are, either on a micro or macro level, choosing your life experiences, right? So this is where I don't think that we can ever really know how detailed we are in
Mm-hmm.
terms of when we're choosing the things that are going to happen to us. Like, were we choosing, the clothing that we were going to wear when that happened, like, versus the way that I sometimes look at it, especially having the system. It's like, well, you chose the energy and you let that energy go out and you let that energy play, and you could see all of the different potential, and you could understand that one of the potential things to happen when that energy was out and playing together was some of the challenges that would arise. And that even if there is a certain lesson, for example, and this is one of the numbers that it shows up in your chart, the 9 9. So the 9 is the most powerful number in the system. And when you have a 9 in your chart, it's about learning to use power responsibly. But often, when someone has this number in their chart, you're starting from the place of disempowerment. You're having to learn what disempowerment feels like, and then you're learning to express that disempowerment. You're learning to claim back your power, to really own your power. And finally, kind of like the last stage of that lesson is once you have power, to use it responsibly and integrity. But that's not usually where you're starting that lesson.
Mm-hmm.
You start from, oh, I'm being disempowered. I don't have any power at all. And it's because you've experienced that most often is why you're so motivated to not make anyone else feel that way. Oh, well, I've been there. And now that the tables have turned, now that I'm in the position of power, I don't want to disempower anyone else. Um, so again, to what degree have you chosen exactly the way that that plays out for you? I don't necessarily know. It could vary, right? Based off the soul and the other agreements they have with certain
Mm-hmm.
souls. Maybe you did make an agreement with a certain person that they were going to be your childhood bully, right? Maybe you did have that agreement in place. Whereas for someone else, it could just be, they went into a family, they're going to be the youngest of five. They knew there was going to be some disempowerment by being the baby of the family, right? So they had that knowledge. They knew it might play
Mm-hmm.
out that way. So again, it can be controversial for some people to think that we've chosen our traumas, we've chosen our difficulties. I would never choose this family. It's like I don't always know why, but I do believe that there is choice, that there is intention, and that it doesn't always make sense to us. And that's the really hard part of, like, we want to make it make sense because we think that's the only way
Mm-hmm.
maybe that it's worth it. I don't know. What do you think on that?
Well, I definitely agree we've got choices. I definitely agree that before we come here on Earth, we make agreements
Mhm.
uh, with whom we'll have to go, with whom we'll have to navigate through certain challenges or, life lessons. So I'm a big believer of that. I certainly believe that we choose our parents and we
Yeah.
choose our siblings and we choose our closest circle. We when we come to Earth, not always we remember, and throughout the years of being here on Earth, we start re-remembering what soul agreements, what contracts have we signed, so it becomes more clearer. So that's what I believe. I've also wanted to ask you because I know so many adults change their names, and I think you
Yeah.
talked about it as well. What's your understanding? Do you think when, as adults, we change our names, is it because our souls believe that we've already learned all of the lessons that we had to? Or can it be also used when some adults decide that they want to skip some life lessons and they'd rather learn something else? What's your view on
Yeah.
that?
Well, yeah, there is actually a way of interpreting and understanding name changes and just additional names that you've had. So within the system, the name that you have at birth is your birth chart. And this is always the primary intention. These are the main lessons. This is the main life purpose and goals. But what happens is that anytime you change your name, or use a different variation of your name, even though that maybe the name itself is the same. For example, for me, right, on my birth certificate, I have a first, middle, and last name.
Mm-hmm.
And yet in school, I would just be known by my first and last name, right? So we call that a common use, or if your name really has changed, we might call it a current name. And anything other than your birth certificate name goes in the category of an overlay name. So an overlay name will act a little bit differently than a birth chart, because what it's meant to do is to bring new energies into your life, right? By new energies, new frequencies, again, creating new experiences. It's all meant to come in with the intention of helping you work through the energies of your birth chart. So, for example, right, you may have some very challenging energies in your birth chart. And, maybe they are kind of subjectively more of the difficult energies, or it could just be that you've just gotten stuck with these, right? It's not that they're the most difficult energies, but you, for whatever reason, have just kind of gotten a little bit stuck in the energies. You're having difficulty working through whatever those challenges and lessons are. So your talents, right? I always think of them as tools. Well, for those who know the Alanis Morissette song, ironic, right? There's that line in the song of, 10,000 spoons, but all you need is the knife. You could have some really, really great tools, but they're just not quite that right fit for the challenges that you're facing. So by bringing new energies in, it's kind of like repacking your toolbox, getting some new tools in there, and maybe finally now you have a knife and you're like, finally, I can cut this, because these 10,000 spoons weren't doing anything. And now I have a knife, and now I can really cut through this cord. I can cut through this stake, this rope, whatever you want to imagine you're cutting through. So that's really the primary intention of a name change, is to bring new energies in. Now, we do talk about that as a soul, they will have planned for a name change. They will have planned that these new energies are going to come in. So maybe it's like, yeah, you were supposed to be stuck in your 20s.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the plan. Again, I don't really even believe in time from the spiritual world. So I just use plan because that's the way it makes sense to our brains, living out time in a linear way.
Mm-hmm.
But we could have a whole other conversation
Yes.
on if I even
Mm-hmm.
think it's a plan. But that it was really planned, of like, yeah, you're gonna get it a little bit stuck here in your 20s. That's part of it for whatever reason. And maybe when you're 40, you're gonna teach from that place of, yeah, you spent your whole 20s being stuck, and then you're going to be able to teach and help others through that by the time you're in your 40s. So you needed to experience that. Maybe it wasn't the right time for the new energies to come in yet. Maybe, for many women, they change their name because they get married. So it's like, well, that person wasn't going to enter your life until you're 30. So you weren't going to get those new energies until then, whatever the reasons are. But yes, that, we do say that these name changes are kind of known and planned for by the soul. Or again, from a place of free will, once you know this system, we actually have a process called name optimization,
Okay.
which I say is essentially an intentional name change, where by your knowledge of the system, or the practitioner's knowledge, if you're going and working with a practitioner, that you're saying, hey, where am I having trouble? Where am I having difficulty? Where am I stuck? What are the energies that I need help working through? And so what energies could we bring in to be the right tool for that? But also, who are you trying to be right now? Who are you trying to become? What are your goals? What are your dreams? And what energies can we call in to help with that? So, for example, if a woman has recently become a mother, and she is changing her name, she's wanting to do that, she can look at the energies that are going to be helpful for working through the challenges of the birth chart. But there's also a number which you have in your chart, which is
Mm-hmm.
the 13-4. And this is like the divine mother energy. So she might also say, because I'm now entering this next stage of my life of motherhood, I also want to call that in. And the 13-4 honestly is one of those numbers that it's also gonna most likely be very, very helpful wherever it lands in the chart. So it's gonna be both helping you work through your birth chart, but also the intentionality. Um, but for example, if someone had the goal of, starting a podcast, there are certain numbers that I sort of see as being like
Mm-hmm.
really, really great for podcasts. So I might be like, let's get you one of those numbers because it's going to help with your ability to speak in a grounded, relatable way. It's going to help you to explain things in a clear way that people understand. Like, let's get some of those numbers in
Mm-hmm.
there. So yeah, so we can kind of look and actually intentionally change our names based off of where are we having trouble? Where do we need help in our birth chart? And who do we want to be? Who do we want to become?
Mm-hmm. I love it. And I know before the podcast, you asked me whether you could prepare a chart for me. And I said,
Yeah.
yes, I'm all about, well, I so much believe in all those different modalities because for me, well, the baseline message is always the same. It's fascinating, but the way you come to conclusion, the way you interpret is different. So, and I know you asked me whether there are any particular questions that you can ask me or not. And you know, I'm all about transparency. And at this stage of my life, throughout my life experiences, and even through the episodes of this podcast, I can help others.
Yeah.
So yeah, I told you yes. Yeah, let's
Awesome.
really
Yeah.
go for
Now,
it.
before we jump into your chart, I do want to make a caveat because you come from Poland, so your name is Polish.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this system was really designed when Frank Alpert, because he's a man from the United States. So when he was channeling it in, it was sort of it was channeling like, okay, from English into Hebrew. So
Mm-hmm.
there's actually a process when someone is not a native English speaker, their name would not be pronounced in native English. Um, that we first change the phonetics of
Mm-hmm.
their name into English and then do the
Mm-hmm.
kind of change it into Hebrew. But what we can also do is we can do just the written form. So that's what I've done. I actually haven't done the training, the phonetics training to
Mm-hmm.
really take your name phonetically. But what's amazing is so for most people, right, or I'm assuming most people listening, if they're going to be native English speakers, so someone like myself, a native English speaker, I just have the one birth chart. It's the name on my birth certificate as written. For yourself, you have two. They're both valid.
Mm-hmm.
So we look at your name as written, which is what we're going to talk about today. But there is going to be a whole other chart that you have. And anyone who's a non-native English speaker will have these two charts. So the phonetic or the written version, let's start there. It ends up being a little bit more personality based. It might be a little bit more 3D. And for many people, if they're maybe a little newer to a spiritual journey or not even really on much of a spiritual journey yet, it's like it's all that they're ready for. That's all that they're
Mm-hmm.
ready to hear in this moment. Whereas the phonetic version ends up being this like deeper soul version and soul intention. And so sometimes, well, we always will start with that written version. And sometimes people just might not ever be ready to hear that phonetic version. I'm sure someone like yourself would like, if I knew how to do it, we could do both and you could see that how they
Mm-hmm.
vary. Um, but yeah, for today, we're going to do a little bit more. We're just going to focus in on this written version of your chart, which might be a little bit more personality and 3D based. But yeah, I'm excited to jump in with this for you.
Yes,
So
me too. And then I know you're going to share your screen so then the viewers
yeah,
will be able to see the chart and then you'll describe the chart so all the listeners will be able to get an understanding of what you're
yeah. So
talking
let
about
me
as
go
well.
ahead and bring that up. And I do recommend, even if you usually just listen, that you hop over to YouTube, be able to see this visual because I do think it helps a lot when you can see it. But basically, what the chart looks like is it looks like a Star of David or a 2D Merkaba. So we have a triangle that's facing up and we have a triangle that's facing down. And so our downward facing triangle is our physical triangle, these are going to be the energies that are more at play within the physical world, in our external world. Whereas our triangle that points up, you can think of it pointing towards the heavens, right? This is our spiritual triangle. And these are the energies that are, we have access to and are playing out in the spiritual world, or maybe more internally for us. Within each triangle, there are three aspects, and that's karma, talents, and goals. So your karma, these are your challenges, and these are the lessons that your soul has come to
Mhm.
learn. And remember, as I sort of mentioned before, you and I could have the same physical karma, in this case on your written version of your name, that's a 12-3. So two people could have the same physical karma, but think of it like a menu. They've actually chosen different items and lessons
Mhm.
off of the menu. So it doesn't mean exactly what's going to happen, but it shows potential. Then we have our talents. These, again, are our abilities and our tools that we have access to help us navigate our challenges and learn our lessons, to be able to work through our karma. Now, with karma, it's important to know, because you're not meant to get stuck here, right? You're meant to
Mhm.
work through it. So if you think about it, when you get to the point of really learning a lesson, you are transmuting that karmic experience into a talent. So your karma turns into talents as you work through it. It's just asking you to do a lot of work to get to that point. I love to use the analogy of, imagine you had a huge boulder, and they're telling you that inside that boulder there is, a hunk of gold, but you have to chip away, chip away, chip away, chip away, chip away in order to get there. Whereas your talents actually will ask you to learn a little bit of a lesson before they unlock for you. But this is going to be like a locked door where you have a ring of keys, and you might have to kind of try a few out before you get there. You might have to do a little bit of learning, but really, you have the ability, you have the tools in hand to be able to unlock that door if you keep working at it. Now, I don't think this is going to be the case for anybody listening to this
Mhm.
podcast, but we probably all know people in our lives who are so resistant to whatever lessons are in front of them. They could spend their whole lives and never unlock their talents because they just never lent into that. They never leaned into the lesson. They just spent their whole life running away and resisting. And it's like, we're just asking you to put the different keys in the locks. We're not asking
Mhm.
you to do that much. We're not asking you to pick up an axe and chip away at the boulder. But they just may never do it. Um, and then your goals are pretty self-explanatory, right? It's a goal. It's going to be more challenging than a talent, but it's not going to be as challenging as your karma, as your primary lesson. So it's a goal. It's going to make you work for it. You may or may not achieve that goal. Again, how much are you leaning into it versus
Mhm.
resisting it? Um, but it's a little bit of a mix. It's like 40 to 60% of a challenge, whereas your talents are only 20% of a challenge, and your karma is 100% of a challenge. So that is the chart. Again, I really recommend taking a look, because I think it just makes a lot more sense when you can see this visual. There's also going to be a symbol for every number, which is really interesting to look at. They represent what the numbers are. And they actually transmit the frequency of the number. So for some people, they can just spend time kind of meditating, looking at those symbols, and feel the transmission of the energy of that number. Any questions so far, Marta, on the?
No, I'm very excited and curious about you going over my chart, and I really think it's going to help other people to get an understanding what
Yeah.
information and knowledge can you gain
Yeah.
by having uh, well, their charts done by you. And yes,
So obviously we're not going to go as in depth today,
of
because
course.
usually a birth chart reading is going to be a full hour, but I do want us to kind of touch a little bit on each of these numbers, and just for you to be able to share how it resonates for you.
Okay.
So the 12-3, I love this number. This number is my soul destiny. I think it's great. It's one of my favorites. It's the forever student. The 12 is all about expansion, always wanting to learn, always wanting to grow. And it's complemented really nicely by the 3, which is a teacher energy. It's teaching from the soul. So with the 12-3, what you want to be careful of is because the 12 wants consistent growth and expansion, and it can feel very, there can be a rush energy. So again, I have this in my chart. I sometimes feel like my soul, it's always wanting to grow, and it's always wanting to do things now. So you want to be careful not to burn out when you have this number, because it's like they're not wanting to take that time to rest. You really have to force that 12-3 to sit down and take a break. So I'm curious if you, do you relate to that idea of being a forever student? Here you are with a podcast. You are obviously teaching. It's a communication number. It's all about expression. So this is a great number to have for a podcast, by the way. But do you relate to that? I feel in a rush. I feel like everything needs to happen now. Like I feel guilty taking a rest sometimes.
So I had to learn that, and I'm at this stage of my life where it is much easier for me to slow down, to surrender, and to trust the universe. So since I've stepped
Yes.
on to that mediumship spiritual journey, it's easier. But I definitely agree. I'm a forever student, and my spirit guides, they've recently had a conversation with me, and they tell me enough of certifications, enough of degrees, you're just ready, like
Yeah.
start teaching, like
Yes.
so yes, I do have that tendency. And even if I look at my academic background, I first started, I have a bachelor in tourism and recreation. um, then I went and I studied at the Faculty of Economics, Marketing and Management. When I came to Scotland, I started working, and then I thought like, it's boring, like I want to learn. So I went back to uni, and I did masters in translation studies.
Mm.
I then opened my own company um, that I had for over 10 years, but then something was still missing. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do a PhD in social anthropology. Uh,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
so
Yeah,
this is what
that's
I
so
did. And I'm
12-3.
like, okay, enough of those academic qualifications. Right now, I really trust my spirit team, the way they want to develop me, and they are the ones who can issue me any certifications. So no, I'm at this stage where I'm getting ready to be able to teach and to be able to make use of everything that I've learned. I am a forever student, so yeah, I'm still learning, but I try to slow down and breathe and allow that knowledge to really sink in.
Yes. Yes. And that's so important, because what the 12-3 doesn't realize sometimes is like, if you, it's like, if you think about sort of learning like in a consuming point of view, right? If we always are eating, like you're eating 24/7, when are you ever digesting the food that you eat, right? It's like you have to have that time to integrate that knowledge that comes in. And I love using the analogy that, imagine you were going out for a bike ride, right? Well, it's really great to have the strength and the power and the ability to ride your bike up a steep hill. That is very admirable, right? But if you're going on a 20-mile bike ride, that 12-3 energy is going to push you to want to go on a steep
Mhm.
uphill incline for 20 miles. And your
Mhm.
physical body is going to say no, right? The 12-3 is like, what do you mean we have to backtrack and do the same thing again? And the physical body is like, please let me just go downhill right now. That was really
Mhm.
hard to get to this point. Please let me just coast and enjoy this flat ride. I cannot keep going up and up and up forever. But the 12-3 just doesn't get it. So
Mhm.
I talk to these energies. Like, I'm aware of them. I talk to them. So I will become aware that my 12-3 is just trying to continuously go to that next step. And I am super proud of myself the same way that you're sharing. It's like we have learned, which is the point, right? It's the lesson that we navigate, and we don't stay in the same place forever. So I don't even have to talk to the energy as much. But at the times when I was kind of in the middle of that challenge, I would realize, oh, there's part of me, my 12-3 energy wants to do this right now. I'm just going to tell it that it's on hold, that it is going to happen, but it's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen this week. It's not going to happen, this year, whatever that time frame sort of is. Now, there's another number in your chart, this 6-6 that you have as your physical talents, that these two energies together, right? Either the 6-6 can really be helping your 12-3, but depending on where someone may have a 6-6 in their chart or where you are in the progress of unlocking that talent, those two energies together can be dangerous in terms of burnout, because the 6, it's all about creativity. It's also about focus. And the 6, they have the ability and the talent to have the spark of an idea, have the inspiration, be able to see in their mind and create the step-by-step plan. Like, think about 100-point plan to be able to turn that inspiration, that dream, into reality, and then to actually have the follow through to act out every step of this plan. Now, so this is like a Taurus energy, can be a little bit stubborn as well. But think about when you have the 6-6 and the 12-3 together, the 12-3 is saying, oh, 100 things and 100 things to do now, 100 things to do at once. Well, no, the 6 is talented, right? The 6 is able to do these things one at a time, but the 6 then has the tendency, when it's in its challenge phase, to try and do too many things at once. I like to use the analogy then of plates that are spinning. If you try and spin 10 plates, they're gonna fall, they're gonna crash on the ground, and now you have no plates spinning, right? You're gonna try and do too many things at once. You're gonna burn out, you're gonna get overwhelmed, and now nothing is happening. So what the 6 needs to learn is to focus, to prioritize, to realize that that 100 to-do list is in step and in order. You're not doing it all at once. And to say, okay, I have the capacity right now to do one thing. So let me do one thing. And maybe at other points, it's like, you know what? I actually have the capacity to do 3 things. I will spin 3 plates. But now something else just got introduced. Okay, I can't spin 4 plates. So I either need to not take that 4th plate on, or I need to think about which of the plates that I'm currently spinning can I put down so I can pick that other plate up, and kind of just know in any moment, what's your capacity? Can you only have 1 plate? Can you have 3, 5? But not to have more than that going at once, because you're going to end up dropping all your plates. So this is where the 12-3 and 6-6, they can be great together, or they can be dangerous together, because it's like, oh my God, all these things, and it has to all happen right now, and then nothing happens. Or the 6 can be like, you know what, 12-3, I'm going to help you to create your list. I'm going to help you to prioritize. I am going to assure you that this is all going to get done. I'm not going to let you push me into trying to get this all done right now. So where do you see this 6 energy coming up in your life? Do you have that ability to create that list, follow through? Do you are you still in a place of maybe trying to take too many things on at once, or have you really unlocked into that talent?
I think I'm already at the stage where I am able to prioritize and concentrate on one thing at a time. Apart from parenting, where you have to handle so many things at once, but I certainly even do teach my children right now. Like, we do one thing at a time, and then we move on to another task. I am now at the stage where I'm so happy when I'm able to say no to projects, no to people that are not in alignment. Well, there's that shortcut, or people say, is it FOMO, fear of missing out? And I'm now in the group of, is it JOMO, like joy of missing out? So I'm very selective in terms of projects, in terms of people that I want to spend my life with. And yeah, I think it's been a difficult path. I still consider myself chaotically organized, but by me using the word chaotically organized, I'm able actually to prioritize, and I'm able to concentrate on the tasks that actually need to be done right now. And then I'm able to let other tasks wait. Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's where we all need to be when we have this number. Both of those numbers, really. So then we have in the 9-9 that's in your physical goals. So we already touched on this a little bit, that it is about power, but also about disempowerment and learning how to use power responsibly. So one thing that people may do when they have this number in their chart is that because, with great power comes great responsibility, they end up running away from the responsibility. They don't want that responsibility. So they very willingly give up their power to others because they don't want the responsibility that comes with it. So one way that we do this is we give away our power, for example, to teachers. We put these teachers on a pedestal, or, this is how someone may be letting other people make all the decisions in their life, right? Now, I'm someone, I get decision fatigue. I get it, right? And I certainly have moments of just wishing someone would come in and make a lot of decisions for my life. But I do think, we want to be careful with that at times, because decisions are, ways that we can enact our free will, right? And so when we give all of our decisions away, we're giving all of our power away. So I'm curious to hear from you, since we've talked about this number a little bit, like how has, the disempowerment shown up in your life? What are the ways that you are conscious of using your power responsibly? Where kind of are you on this path with the 9?
I'll start from decisions, making decisions. Well, I want to say I've always been, I always enjoyed making my own decisions, and I have not enjoyed other people trying to make those decisions for me. I am certainly aware of a tendency of playing small and really not wanting to be in my power. Yes, and that's one, I feel like I'm on the verge of learning that lesson. And one of the reasons why my spirit guides wanted to create that podcast was for me to start sharing my knowledge and wisdom. It has certainly not been my idea, but I have developed throughout the years a relationship with my spirit guides. And when I am really in a position of needing to make a decision, and then I struggle, they speak out loud and they speak continuously until I have no other choice, and I really make that step into the unknown, into the scary period of my life, because that's the unknown. But I think I've embraced more an idea that you can work with your fears, you can work with those challenges, and then you can still take those actions no matter what. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. This number is one that is very useful to have in a chart because it's so powerful. But it can also definitely be a big challenge, because when we experience disempowerment, those can be some very difficult, life experiences. So it's one that, it can be such a gift, um, but also, right, it has a lot of responsibility. And sometimes people have lived through some like really difficult experiences when they have that number or some of the other really powerful numbers. Now, another very powerful number is your spiritual karma number, the 13-4. The 13, as I mentioned, it's this, divine mother energy. It's the divine feminine energy. And when this number is in karma, it can often manifest as a mother wound. So I'm curious how your relationship was with your mother.
Well, my relationship with both of my parents has been really difficult. So my mom died over a year ago, and it's only now that we have started communicating, and we've started, well, I've forgiven her before she crossed over. I helped her to transition, but both of my parents, they have traces of narcissistic personality disorders. So my childhood was very, very difficult. I was very much emotionally abused. And I guess this other number that you've mentioned, like I really felt, or like my family of origin really tried to disempower me. And I've always questioned my choices. Like I've never had a feeling of belonging to that family. I've always been the scapegoat because my, well, I want to say strength is in telling people the truth. And when the truth's not convenient, people don't want to hear it. So no, my relationship with my mother has been very, very challenging. Both of my parents are also addicted to alcohol. That's why my mom died. And yeah, when you're addicted and substances take over your thinking brain, you sometimes say things that maybe you don't want to, or maybe you don't have courage to. So my mom's done like lots of damage, and I've had to do lots of healing. Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's interesting because I didn't mention this when we talked about the six, but the six, because it's so focused and you can get to the point of overly focused and like fanatical energy, they can also face addictions. And it's either, the person with the six may have addictions or people in their family. So that's clearly how that manifested in your case was family members with addictions. So I see that playing out in relation to that six energy. Um, so bringing us to well, actually, let me mention one more thing about this 13-4 is that it's also the Christ consciousness energy. It's a very high frequency energy. If, I mentioned that process of name optimizations, if a 13-4 shows up in one of the names that we're looking at, it's certainly a really positive sign that that Christ consciousness energy is coming through. That very, not religious, for anyone who's maybe not familiar with the term, it's, that very loving, love your neighbor, unity consciousness mindset. So it's a very, very beautiful energy. And actually, you've been talking about trust. The 4 is all about trust. It's about trusting in the flow of abundance from the universe. But I have this number in my chart as well. And I do see it coming up right now as learning to trust myself, trusting my own gut, trusting my own instincts and my own intuition. And, we're talking about nines. I also have nines in my chart and, giving decisions away. What spirit has been showing me is that I've been leaning on spirit too much. And
Mm-hmm.
not that I'm letting other people make decisions in my life, but I'm going to spirit with every decision.
Mm-hmm.
What should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And they're like, just, you know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are you asking us? Like, I've actually found recently, like, my guides are basically lying to me, which sounds weird to people, might sound weird, but it's this sense of, because I muscle test everything all the time. So I'll kind of have an idea. I'll ask a question and I'm assuming, they're going to say no. And I ask, and the muscle test is yes. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I felt like that was going to be a no. And they're like, what did you just say? I'm like, I felt that. They're like, yeah, you felt that.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you asking?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So they're basically lying to me a little bit right now to make me just like trust my gut and make decisions for myself and like not even give my power away to them. They're like, own this, girl.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's the 13-4 energy. Trust is a big one. With those threes and the fours in your chart as well, self-worth can be a really big theme and like feeling of unworthiness. I'm curious, especially because it's both in their karmic numbers. Like, what has been your journey in feeling maybe perhaps very deeply unworthy and like working through that?
Mm-hmm. It definitely makes sense because I was so much abused and, well, emotionally abused and shamed by both of my parents for who I was as a person, for how I looked. So it all started when I was a young child, where I quickly learned the idea that I wasn't worthy, that there wasn't a single thing that was okay with me.
Yeah.
And then I ended up in an abusive relationship that so I was in that marriage for over 11 years, and we all never want to repeat our patterns. I was so aware of my father's behavior, and then subconsciously we choose our partners if certain um, karma lessons have not been resolved. So here I had to go over through very difficult lessons again, and that has really impacted my self-worthiness again. So it's been a journey, and I can't say that I'm 100% confident right now, but I am definitely now tapped in very much to who I am as a person, and I have been learning to be very kind towards myself. So I think I'm definitely in a better place and space right now.
Yeah. That really leads us really perfectly into these next two numbers you have in your chart, because you have as the spiritual talents an 11-2, and then as the spiritual goals a 2-2. So with the 11-2, the 11 is very much about structure. And when you have this in your chart, now granted, you have it as a talent, but still, you could have been starting from a place of initially lacking structure and not having an internal structure. And so, what can happen when this is the case for people is that through their relationships, whether romantic or otherwise, people will provide structure for them. So they become dependent on the structure and thus dependent on the person to provide that structure for them. So one thing that is not uncommon, it doesn't necessarily happen for everybody, but it's pretty common that people with an 11-2, have this theme of codependency in relationships. So was that one of the maybe patterns with your ex?
Well, definitely,
Yeah.
because of the known from when I was a child. So definitely it was a codependent relationship. So I had to learn a lot. Yes.
Yeah. The other aspect then coming more so from the two is that the two has this lesson um of foolishness to wisdom. And it's the idea that you maybe make some rash decisions, you make some decisions without all the information, you just make these foolish choices. Maybe they're really emotionally driven, but when you haven't given time for that emotion to settle, um so you make these foolish decisions over and over and over again until you reach the place of seeing things clearly and objectively from height. It has to deal with height. And part of what the lesson is to learn to wait till you get to that objective place to make your decisions, but also just recognizing that those foolish decisions, you learn a lot of wisdom from it. You learn a lot. And so part of what can happen with that is that from this foolishness to wisdom, from that foolishness place, they can end up attracting in people who are energetically very damaging. And so I can definitely see that then being the case for you. And it's so especially with the 11-2, which has both that foolishness aspect of the two as well as that codependency coming more so from the 11. They can have some very difficult relationships. It's true. Um, the 11-2, though, as a spiritual talent, so this is the number I have in my chart as well. I
Mm-hmm.
have an 11-2 spiritual talent. And it's all about the 11 is a builder energy. And so when you think about that being in the spiritual triangle, it's not something that's maybe going to be brick or mortar. It's not something that might exist in the physical world. Rather, it's more about building a philosophy or building a structure of truth. And so you've talked about how you've been learning to express your truth. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's very on the plan for you, right? That you're going to build the structure of truth. Then you have the 11-2 has the teacher energy as well. The 12-3 has the teacher energy. The 13-4 has teacher energy. Um I think it really does makes a lot of sense for you that you're here to build this structure of truth and then to teach it to the world. So that's beautiful.
Thank you.
And with the 2 of the goals, another aspect of the 2 is that it's about resiliency and it's associated with the moon in astrology. So it's a really emotional resiliency, especially. And that the big lesson for the 2 is that it's learning to respond rather than to react. So I wonder where you are with that, if that's something that you've seen a lot of growth in yourself, if you're maybe still working on, or
Mm-hmm.
has that not come up for you?
Oh no, it has certainly come up for me. And I think, well, I can't say that I've learned it completely, but no,
Yeah.
I'm able right now, especially being in an abusive relationship. And after having left, I had to learn how to respond, not to react, because there were so many strong emotions involved. And especially because we have children together. So I still need to be in contact with my ex-partner, and he would try on purpose to trigger me. So I had to learn how
Yes.
not to react.
Oh my
Uh,
God, yes.
but yeah, in general, yes, well, emotions would frequently in the past take over. And I feel now, with the support of angels, I have mastered that ability of being able to remove myself and not to make decisions when I'm stressed or when I'm being triggered.
Yes. That's beautiful. Now, finally, the soul destiny. Now, in this chart, I know people are always so wanting to know what is their purpose? What is their purpose? What is their purpose? Now, when it comes to the way that we view purpose within this system, the soul destiny number is that it is, again, it's an overarching life goal. You can think of it as something that's kind of present in your everyday, but it's really something that stretches over your life. It's not going to be as much a specific thing that you do and that you achieve. It's more of that it just adds this flavor. Now, with that being said, whatever number is your soul destiny, it acts like a third karmic point at the beginning of your life, which just means that whatever number that is, you're facing those challenges. You're navigating those
Mm-hmm.
challenges, which is why I have 12/3 as a soul destiny. That number is very challenging for me. I've had to work through and navigate a lot of those challenges because it's soul destiny. So we could really spend a lot of time getting into what are the challenges of the 8s. We won't do that here now, but I will say when you have an 8/8 as soul destiny, that the 8 is the most grounded number of the system. It is the most physical number of the system. It also is a very relatable energy, but when it is in karmic, people tend to want to hide away. You have a couple of numbers that want to hide. 6s
Mm-hmm.
want to hide and
Mm-hmm.
be in isolation. The
Mm-hmm.
3, the symbol is like a labyrinth, a canal. They want to hide away in there. Um, being shy, not wanting to express themselves, feeling unworthy. So the 8s also just they don't want to integrate into society because what can happen is that they're a very high frequency soul with the goal of creating heaven on earth, but then coming to earth and feeling the density of it, feeling the heaviness, the weight of having a physical body and emotions. When as a soul, they may have not had that for a long time, because the 8s often show up in the charts of souls of people who are souls that maybe don't incarnate, especially on earth, very frequently. So they can just not want to deal with society because they're like, all of this is a lot. It's too much. I want to be on my own. I don't want to be in my body because it's heavy. I don't want to be in my body because I don't like all the emotions that I feel. I don't want to feel any of this. So they try to think all their emotions, to process their emotions like through their brain that rather than really feeling them. Here I was saying I'm not going to talk about it and I'm talking about it, but
Mm-hmm.
there you go. Um, so essentially, keeping all of that in mind, what it means when you have an 8/8 as your soul destiny, as your overarching life purpose, is that you are here to ground the energies of your soul and to relate them to society. So it does ask you then to be able to ground in to your
Mm.
own body, right? In order to ground in that spiritual soul energy. And then you have to get out into society if you're going to relate that energy to society. So how do you feel? How do you resonate with that life purpose?
Mm-hmm. It certainly resonates. And what popped into my mind is, well, when we look at my astrology chart, um, I'm Taurus. Well, my son's
Mhm.
in Taurus, and I'm ascended Scorpio. So there are those
Mhm.
contradictory well forces. So the Taurian part of me is very much grounded, whereas the Scorpio one is very mystical and it's so much into the spiritual realm. So it definitely makes sense. And certainly when I was younger, or especially as a child, I didn't, well, I've always felt a lot. And now I've learned, well, I'm still learning sometimes to be able to protect my energy and not to pick up the energy of other people. But yes, it is sometimes very difficult. And I do have tendencies, or I had tendencies when I go through various challenging life experiences where my nervous system gets dysregulated, and then I feel even much more, and then I would want to hide. So yeah, it does resonate. Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I really see, a lot of with that too energy. I really think that nervous system regulation is so important, right? Because that's how we can learn to get to that place of responding. And, it does work with those eights as well, right? That connection into your body and all of that. So that's all really beautiful. And yeah, I this is such a beautiful chart to have. And it's amazing hearing from you, the areas that you've already been working through and where the parts that you're maybe still working on. So yeah,
Well, thank you so much for sharing and for doing that reading for me. I've learned a
of
lot
course.
about myself, and I hope it has given some clarity for the viewers and listeners about what that soul contract system can actually do for them. So, could you share with the viewers and listeners about ways that people can work with you? What are your offerings, and then where people can find you?
Certainly. So right now, my website is thenaminglady.com. I love this work. And there's actually a part of this work that we look at the names of businesses. And I love that. I think it's so fun. This is where I feel like I get to bring out my creativity so much. I studied linguistics in college. So I say I get to look at the name linguistically, like
Mm-hmm.
the actual words that you're choosing and what do they
Mm-hmm. Love
mean,
it.
as well as energetically and making sure that what you're trying to say linguistically, like the vibe of that your words matches the energy of the name. So if you have a business and you want to be able to make sure that the energy of your business is really matching what your goals are and who you want to work with, I highly recommend getting that reading. um Mostly, for a lot of people, I know that they're probably, that's not their path. So they just want to do a soul contract, looking at their birth chart, or have the extended session, which is where we look at your overlay names. So the other names that you've had over your life, whether that's just looking at your first and last name, because you've never legally changed your name, or looking at other names that you've had in your lifetime due to marriage or any other circumstances. So those are available. I'm still kind of working on some of the structure, speaking of 11 too, right? The
Mm-hmm.
structure of some of the other offerings. So I do want to have my name optimization service up and running, but that's still in the progress of being able to have that be booked. And then there's another modality that I do, which is called divine healing, which is like it is an energetic healing, like a similar kind of to quantum healing in that respect, where you do healing on an energetic level, but there's a little bit more talking, so we
Mm-hmm.
look at patterns and that could be in your subconscious. One of the charts is like the subconscious hidden ego agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, what's your ego doing? And it's maybe keeping you a little bit stuck. So I think it is a great tool that goes along with the soul contract work. Sometimes, I have a number in my chart, the 10-1, that can be very critical or perfectionist. So sometimes I set the intention of like, let's work on that 10-1 energy. And then
Mm-hmm.
sure enough, what ends up coming up during the session has that theme for sure. So that's something else that I do. If you want to follow along, see some of what I'm posting on Instagram, that's I am Lauren Rose is my Instagram handle there. I have a business spotlight series that I'm working on, so I will post little mini business readings for people. I have
Mm-hmm.
some more information on the business side, but we'll see how that progresses in time. And then of course there's the podcast that I host with my fellow co-host, Yana Mormanokas. That's the Let's Talk Vibes podcast. So you can find that at the ltvpodcast.com to get links on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. And so we're going to have some great guest interviews. We talk about people's lives, kind of have mini readings like today's episode, or just conversations where we mention and bring up the energies like the beginning of our conversation, as well as deep dives on each of these numbers. So each number will eventually get its own episode. So it's so exciting. We only have a few episodes out so far, but I already knowing what we recorded, there's some great content to come.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And I've really enjoyed listening to your podcast so far, so I can recommend it to everyone. And I'm going to add all of the links under the description of the podcast. So, Lauren, thank you so much for coming
Thank
and
you.
speaking with me. And I want to say thank you to all of the viewers and the listeners. Okay, thank you. Okay, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye bye.